prophetic attribute.
وصفات محمدية.
And these prophetic attributes of Muhammad.
يرضاها رب البرية جل وعلا. يرضاها ربنا سبحانه وتعالى.
What Allah has, the most generous, is pleased with.
وصلنا إلى بيان دلالات النبوة.
And we have reached to the clarification of the proofs of prophethood.
فمن هذه الدلالات اشترطوا أن يكون أهل الفتوة من أهل النصح.
And from the features, rather, is that those of futuwah should be from those who give good counsel.
النصح فيه دلالة على محبتك للآخرين كما تحب لنفسك.
And this giving counsel is a sign that you love for others what you love for yourself.
وتكره لهم من الشر ما تكره لنفسك.
And you dislike for them that which is not is evil that you would dislike for yourself.
وهذه أخلاق الكرام وضدها أخلاق اللئام.
And these are the attributes of the honorable, and what is opposing to these are the attributes of the dishonorable.
وقد ذكر الإمام الغزالي رحمه الله تعالى أن النصيحة هي من أقوى العلاجات لخروج الحسد من القلب.
Imam Ghazali mentions that giving advice is of the greatest means of curing, is the way of curing the heart from just having envy towards others.
رأينا في حياة الصحابة رضي الله عنهم أنهم كانوا يتبادلون هذه النصيحة كما يتبادل الناس الهدايا.
And we would find in the lives of the companions that they would exchange advice as we exchange gifts.
حتى قال سيدنا عمر بن الخطاب رضي الله عنه في خلافته لسيدنا سلمان الفارسي.
Such that Umar ibn al-Khattab said during his khilafah to the companion Salman al-Farisi.
وقد قدم عليه.
And he had come to him.
ما الذي بلغك عني مما تكره يا سلمان؟
He said to him, what has reached of you regarding my state that you dislike, O Salman?
قال فأعفني يا أمير المؤمنين.
He said, please excuse me, O leader of the believers.
فألح عليه سيدنا عمر.
So he insisted, Sayyidina Umar.
فقال بلغني أنك لبست في يوم حلتين وأنك جمعت في طعام واحد بين إدامين.
It has reached me that in one day you wore two garments, and that you in one meal combined two separate types of foods.
فقال سيدنا عمر هل بلغك عني غير ذلك؟
He said to him, Sayyidina Umar said to him, is anything else reached you that you dislike about me?
فقال لا.
He said no.
قال أما هذان فقد كفيتهما.
He said, regarding these two affairs and matters, then don't worry, I'll never return to them again.
فقبل سيدنا عمر هذه النصيحة، وإن كان ما بلغه بالنسبة لنا شيء قليل ربما لعذر من الأعذار، لكن لم يبرر سيدنا عمر. مشكلة الكثير منا إذا نصح يأتي بالأعذار ويأتي بالتبريرات، وهذا خطأ. اقبل هذه النصيحة، فإن كانت لهذه النصيحة مجال في حياتك فأنزلها.
He said, so Sayyidina Umar accepted this advice from Salman, even though it's something that is small in our eyes, something that is little. But he accepted it, and he didn't stand obstinate and to try to justify this behavior, but rather he accepted it. And this is a problem amongst a lot of people, that when they are given good advice and good counsel, that they try to justify it or they become obstinate.
الدلالة السادسة هي الستر والغفر.
And the next trait of those of futuwah is that a person conceals others' faults and is forgiving.
ففي الستر والغفر سخاء النفس عما اعتاص عليها.
He says, and these two attributes of concealing faults and forgiveness is of the attributes of the heart that is of generosity, the giving of the soul, such that it gives from what one dislikes.
قال الإمام الحسن البصري رحمه الله تعالى أفضل أخلاق المسلمين الغفر.
That Imam Hassan al-Basri said the best attribute and trait and quality of the believers is forgiving and pardoning.
ومعنى الغفر يعني المسامحة.
And forgiving means that you pardon somebody.
وهذه أخلاق قرآنية.
And these are the Quranic attributes.
ذكروا في بعض بلاد المسلمين، وهذه البلد اسمها شبام في نواحي بلادنا هناك، نواحي حضرموت.
You said in a township that's known as Shibam, which is there in the valley of Hadramut.
أن الوالي عين قاضيا.
That the governor selected a judge.
فبقي القاضي هذا في مكتب قضائه أو في محل قضائه سنوات طويلة لم يترافع عليه أحد من الناس.
And this judge sat in his post, in his position for many years, and there were no cases that were brought before him.
حتى مرت به 14 سنة.
There were 14 years passed.
ولم يتخاصم اثنان من أهل البلد.
He said there were no plaintiffs, there was nobody that was disputing amongst themselves that came to him.
فتعجب القاضي من هذا.
The judge was amazed regarding this.
أليست بينهم نفوس؟
Don't these people have egos between them?
فقيل له نعم ولكن القرآن أصلح بينهم.
He said, yes, but the Quran has reconciled amongst them.
فقال كيف؟
He said, how?
فقيل له كانوا يمتثلون أمر الله سبحانه وتعالى فمن عفا وأصلح فأجره على الله.
He says they embody the Quranic description, and whomever reconciles and forgives and pardons, then his affairs are with the Creator.
ثم ترافع إليه اثنان بعد 14 سنة.
And after 14 years, two people came to him
في قضية عجيبة.
in a very strange case.
ربما لا يستوعبها عقول كثير من الناس في هذا الزمان.
So people of age might not be able to comprehend this.
فجاء إلى موضع قضائه.
So they came to his court.
وقال بيننا قضية.
Between us there's a case.
فرح القاضي.
The judge was happy, he was elated.
حتى يؤدي شيئا من واجبه.
He can fulfill his obligation.
فقال أين المدعي وضعه في مكان الادعاء أين المدعى عليه ووضعه في المكان الآخر وكان يسوي بينهما في النظر ويأتي بواجبات القضاء وآداب القضاء.
So he brought the plaintiffs before him and he was trying to reconcile between them and through the affairs of judgment and so on and so forth.
فقال للمدعي تكلم.
So the one who has brought the claim, he said, speak.
قال إن أخي هذا اشترى مني إن أخي هذا باع لي أرضا.
He said, this brother of mine has sold me a piece of land.
لما حفرت هذه الأرض لأبني وجدت فيها كنزا.
He said, when I came to build, I dug in the earth and I found there was a treasure.
فحملت هذا الكنز لأخي وقلت له أنا لم أشتري منك الكنز إنما اشتريت منك الأرض وهذا الكنز لك.
He said, so I took this buried treasure and I brought it to my friend and I said to him, I bought the land from you, not this treasure, this buried treasure. This belongs to you, take it.
وهو رفض ذلك.
He said, so he refused it.
فتعجب القاضي ماذا تقول أنت؟
So the judge was amazed. So he said to the other individual, he said, what do you say?
قال إنما اشتريت منه قال إنما بعته هذه الأرض بما فيها ولا أدري أن فيها كنز والكنز هو له ليس لي منه شيء.
He said, I sold this land and I had no knowledge that there was buried treasure. So now that I've sold it to him, it belongs to him.
وأنا لا أقبل هذا الكنز هو له.
He said, so I don't accept it, it belongs to him.
فتعجب القاضي.
The judge was amazed.
فقال هل اتفقتما على شيء؟
He said, have you agreed amongst yourselves upon any matter?
وهذا من فقه القضاء أنه قبل أن يقضي في قضية من القضايا أولا يلوذ إلى الصلح والصلح خير.
And this is from the etiquette of judgment that you should take counsel from those who have come to you to try to reconcile between them among themselves.
فقال نعم اتفقنا على أمر.
They said, yes, we did agree upon an affair.
ما هو؟
He said, what is this?
قالوا له أنت قاضي المسلمين وأنت تعرف مصالح المسلمين خذ هذا الكنز وأنفقه في مصالح المسلمين.
He said, yes. He said, you're the judge that sees over the general affairs of the Muslims and you know where the benefit of the Muslims lie. Take this wealth from us and now you spread it amongst those who are most in need of it.
قال ما شاء الله عليكما تنقذان أنفسكما وتوقعان القاضي.
He said, this is amazing, incredible that you saved both yourselves and now you put me into it.
ففكر القاضي ورفض هذا.
He said, so the judge thought about it and he refused.
فقال لك أولاد قال عندي ولد كبير وهذا قال عندي بنت كبيرة قال إذا زوجوا هذا الولد بهذا البنت بعد أن تخرجوا خمس الركاز هذا والباقي أنفقوه على الولد والبنت وقوموا توكلوا على الله.
He said, he spoke to the first, he said, do you have children? He said, yes. The second, do you have children? He said, yes. He said, then both of you marry your children to one another, your daughter to his son, and this wealth that you have after taking from it what is obligatory to be spent, the fifth of that wealth to be spent, then this is the dowry that will be between you for this marriage.
هكذا إذا دخل القرآن إلى القلب خرجت الدنيا ومحبة الدنيا وخرجت جميع مشاكل الخلق.
When the Quran enters in the heart, everything else leaves the heart of these worldly, lowly affairs.
قال الإمام الفضيل رحمه الله تعالى.
Imam Fudayl says,
الفتوة هي العفو عن زلات الإخوان.
Imam Fudayl says that futuwa is to forgive the faults and failings of brethren and brothers.
قال النبي صلى الله وسلم عليه وعلى آله
The Messenger, peace be upon him, has said,
استعيذوا بالله من أمور. ذكر لنا أمور. قال استعيذوا بالله.
the Messenger said, seek refuge in Allah from a few affairs that he mentions.
منها ذكر استعيذوا بالله من جار السوء.
He says, seek refuge in Allah from the evil neighbor.
ثم بينه عليه الصلاة والسلام.
And he clarified, who is this evil neighbor?
قال الذي إن رأى منك خيرا ستره.
He says, he's the one, if he sees good come from you, he conceals it.
وإن رأى منك شرا أظهره.
And if he sees any bad or evil things from you, then he makes it open and clear and apparent.
في رواية أخرى بسند صحيح.
And another narration, authentic narration,
قول النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم تعوذوا بالله من جار السوء في دار المقام.
is to seek refuge in Allah from the evil neighbor in your settlements.
قال الإمام عبد الله بن المبارك
Abdullah ibn Mubarak says,
المؤمن يطلب عذر إخوانه.
the believer is the one who seeks out excuses for his brothers.
والمنافق يطلب عثراتهم.
And the hypocritical person is the one who seeks out their flaws.
فالمنافق هذا مثل الذباب يقع على الأوساخ يبحث عن هذه الأوساخ.
So the hypocrite becomes like the fly, the insect that lands on filth.
والمؤمن دائما يتطلب هذه الطيبات وينظر إليها ويشرها بين الناس.
And the believer seeks out these beautiful things. He seeks it out and he spreads it amongst people.
من الحكم التي ذكرها شيخنا الحبيب عمر حفظه الله تعالى.
And from the wisdoms and counsels of our Shaykh Habib Umar, Allah preserve him,
قال من نظر إلى محاسن إخوانه جعله الله مجمعا للمحاسن.
the one who sees the excellence in his brothers and brethren, and Allah makes him a container and vessel of all excellent traits.
ومن نظر إلى مساوي إخوانه جعله الله مجمعا للمساوي.
And the one who sees the faults and flaws of his brethren, then he will contain all those faults and those flaws within himself.
هذا هو حال المؤمن دائما يحسن الظن في الناس وينظر إلى المحاسن فيهم ويشهدها وإذا وجد سوءا سد هذا الخلل بالنصيحة.
It says, and the believer then is the one who seeks out these goodly traits within people and spreads it amongst people. And if he sees faults and flaws, then he conceals them and he forgives them.
اللازم السابع من لوازم الفتوة العلم.
And from the attributes of futuwa is knowledge.
لكون هذا العلم يحمل صاحبه على الاتصاف والإنصاف.
That this knowledge carries this person upon noble traits and qualities and being just.
ويورثه أعلى المراتب عند الله تعالى بعد مرتبة النبوة.
And he inherits the highest ranks and loftiest ranks just before prophethood.
كما قال الإمام عبد الله بن المبارك كذلك.
The great Imam Abdullah ibn Mubarak has said,
ما رأيت بين الفتوة والقراءة فرقا إلا في شيء.
He says, I have not seen between futuwa and knowledge or learning except one thing, a differentiation in one thing.
في شيء واحد فقط.
In one thing alone.
قال ما حضرت القراءة شيئا إلا قبحته الفتوة. حضرت يعني منعت.
He says that the futuwa has not prohibited anything except that learning itself has already made it abhorrent.
وإنما يفترقان في أن القراءة يراد بها وجه الله والفتوة قد يراد بها وجوه الناس والمدح منهم.
He says how the distinction is that learning is, when a person seeks knowledge and learning, they are seeking the countenance of Allah, and with regards to futuwa, one can seek what people have and seeks prestige from people.
وكان الإمام سفيان الثوري رحمه الله تعالى يقول
And the great Imam Sufyan al-Thawri would say,
من لم يحسن يتفتى لم يحسن يتقرى.
He says, the one who is not able to excel in the art of learning will not excel in the discipline and the art of futuwa.
أي من لم يعرف أحكام التفتي فهذا لا يستحق أن يكون من أهل العلم.
So the one who does not know the rulings regarding being from among those of futuwa, then he is not deserving of being ascribed of one of learning.
كون هذا العلم سيدعوه إلى مكارم كثيرة.
Since this knowledge calls him towards very lofty, noble attributes and traits.
فإذا لم يمتثلها كان هذا العلم حجة عليه لا حجة له.
So if he does not practice that knowledge and implement it, it becomes a witness against him, not for him.
اللازم الثالث هو كرم الصحبة.
And the third trait is the generosity within companionship and good manners therein.
فالإنسان هو عبارة عن كائن حيوان اجتماعي لا يعيش بمفرده.
So the human being is a social animal that does not live in seclusion.
فلا بد أن يحسن كيف يتعامل مع كل من وافق ومع كل من خالف مع كل من شابه ومع كل من فارق.
He said, so he has to learn how to deal with all types of people, those who are in agreement with him and those who disagree with him, those who are similar to him and those who are dissimilar to him in traits and temperament.
فكرم الصحبة إنما يكون بحسن الأدب.
So noble companionship comes with excellent, noble character and etiquette.
وحسن الأدب في الصحبة أن يصحب من فوقه بالتعظيم.
And so from these attributes of good manners in companionship is that he befriends those who are older than him with respect and honor.
ويصحب من في طبقته وأمثاله وأشكاله بالموافقة والألفة.
And he befriends those who are of a similar level to him and his age group with harmony and affection.
ويصحب من دونه بالعطف والشفقة والرحمة.
And those who are younger than him, then he deals with them with compassion and mercy towards them.
ويصحب الوالدين بالخضوع والمطاوعة.
And he befriends the parents by submitting himself to them and obeying them.
ويصحب أولاده بحسن تربيتهم ورحمتهم.
And he befriends his children by nurturing them and showing compassion and mercy to them.
ويصحب أهله بحسن المداراة دارهم ما دمت في دارهم.
And so he is in the company of his family by showing them appropriate affection and flattering them. And so long as you remain with your family, then you should be your state in dealing with them.
ويصحب الأقارب بالبر والصلة.
And he maintains ties with his family members and relationships with piety and righteousness.
ويصحب الإخوان بصدق المحبة والمودة في الله.
And with brothers, he should be in their company with true sincerity and love for the sake of Allah.
ويصحب الجيران بكف الأذى.
And he is in the company of his neighbors by refraining from harming them.
ويصحب العامة ببشاشة الوجه وبذل النداء.
And so in the company of the general masses and people, he is cheerful, his disposition is cheerful, and he is of a giving nature.
حتى قيل خيركم من كف فكه وفك كفه وشركم من كف كفه وفك فكه.
He says, the worst of you is the one who withholds what's in his palm and releases his jaws, his mouth. He speaks a lot. He said, the best of you is the one who releases his hands but refrains his mouth and tongue.
ويصحب الفقراء والمساكين بتعظيم حرماتهم ومعرفة أقدارهم أنزل الناس منازلهم منزلة المساكين ما قال عنها النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم اللهم احيني مسكينا واحشرني مسكينا اللهم احيني مسكينا وامتني مسكينا واحشرني في زمرة المساكين.
And he befriends those who are destitute or poor in the eyes of people by knowing their true value and their worth. And their true value and worth is what the Messenger, peace and blessings be upon him. He said, oh Allah, allow me to live as amongst those who are destitute and needy, and allow me to die amongst them and resurrect me amongst those who are poor and needy.
ويصحب الأغنياء بإظهار الاستغناء والاستعفاف عن ماله.
He says, and he befriends those who have wealth by not seeking out what they have and not seeking their worldly affairs.
ويصحب العلماء بقبول ما يشيرون به عليه.
And he befriends the great scholars by accepting what they advise him to do.
ويصحب الأولياء بالتذلل بين يديهم وترك الإنكار عليهم.
And he befriends the righteous awliya by accepting what they give and believing in their rank and they're in their station.
ويجتنب في صحبته المبتدعين والمدعين والمتظاهرين بالزهد الراغبين في استتباع الناس وأخذ ما في أيديهم.
And he refrains from the company of those who are innovators and those who are seeking to increase their prestige amongst the people and who put up this false perception of righteousness.
من لوازم الفتوة كذلك أن يكون شفيقا رفيقا بمن يجالس من أخوانه.
And from the traits of Futuwa is that he has affection and empathy with those brothers that he sits amongst.
وأن يخلص في هذه الأخوة إن حضروا وإن غابوا.
And he is sincere in this brotherhood, whether they are there before him or whether they are absent.
فيحفظ حرمتهم في حضورهم.
So he protects their sacred rights in their presence.
بحسن التشاور معهم.
By seeking their counsel.
وفي غيبتهم بالذب عن أعراضهم.
And when they are absent, by protecting their honor and dignity.
قال بعض الحكماء.
Some of the wise have said.
إن من واجب الأخوة على الفتيان مودة الأخ لأخيه بقلبه خالصا.
He said from the rights of this futuwa is that the brother loves his fellow brother purely and sincerely with his entire heart.
ويزين ذلك بلسانه بحيث يثني على إخوانه ما هو فيهم.
And he also follows this by also praising and adorning those brothers with qualities and attributes that are within them.
وأن يرفدهم بماله إذا احتاجوا إلى ذلك.
And that he gives of his wealth to them when they are in need of wealth.
وأن يقومهم بالأدب إذا مالوا عن الأدب.
And that he should remind them of good manners and good attributes and traits if they leave those traits.
سئل الإمام الجنيد رحمه الله تعالى عن الشفقة على الخلق. ما معناها؟
Imam Junaid was asked regarding empathy towards the creation. What does that mean?
قال أن تعطيهم من نفسك ما يطلبون.
To give them of yourself what they want from you.
ولا تحملهم ما لا يطيقون.
And not to burden them with that which they cannot carry.
ولا تخاطبهم بما لا يعلمون.
And don't speak to them with things that they might not be able to comprehend.
سئل بعض الأخيار عن قيل له كيف شفقتك على إخوانك.
One of the righteous was asked, how is your empathy and your affection towards your brothers?
قال لو وقع الذباب على وجه أحدهم لشق ذلك على قلبي.
He said, if a fly was to land on one of them, I would find this difficult and heavy upon myself.
فأجد ألما من وقوع الذباب عليه.
He said, I find it's painful. It pains me when I see a fly land on that person.
هذه أخلاق نبوية.
These are prophetic characteristics.
أن مما يؤثر على قلب النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أن يشاك أحدنا ولو بشوكة.
He says, and it is the prophetic attribute that even if a thorn was to prick one of us, that the Prophet ﷺ would have empathy towards this.
حتى قال الشاعر في هذا المعنى.
That the poet has said in this regard.
وأشفق أن تمشي على الأرض غيرة.
He says, and I feel envy when I see you walking on the ground and the earth.
فليتك وطئت خدي ما حييت أو.
He says, and I wish that you would walk upon my cheek so long as I am alive.
سئل رويم كيف كانت شفقتك على إخوانك؟
Ruwaym was asked, how is your empathy towards your brothers?
قال اعلم يا أخي.
He said, no, my brethren.
أنه ما سرني شيء في الدنيا إلا سرور إخواني.
There is no joy that I have in this world except the joy that my brothers have.
ولا أحزنني شيء في الدنيا إلا ما أحزنهم.
He said, and nothing causes me sadness or grief except that which causes them grief.
هكذا كانت الأخوة بينهم.
This was the type of brotherhood they had amongst them.
هذه بعض لوازم الفتوة.
So these are some of the necessary attributes of futuwa.
ثم أن للفتوة قلبا.
And so futuwa also has a heart.
قال صاحب المنازل.
So the author of the Manazil has said,
قلب الفتوة
the heart of futuwa,
وإنسان عينها,
which is the essence of it,
أن تفنى بشهادة نقصك وعيبك عن فضلك.
He says that you are completely annihilated and immersed in recognizing your faults and flaws above your virtue.
وتغيب بشهادة حقوق الخلق عليك عن شهادة حقوقك عليهم، أي تشتغل بأداء الحقوق للخلق ولا تطالب لنفسك بحق.
You are completely concerned with fulfilling the rights and obligations of others and the responsibilities you have to them, and not seeking your rights from them.
هذا كلام دقيق جدا.
He said this is very precise.
ولهذا قال أن الناس فيه على ثلاثة مراتب.
He said therefore people in this regard are of 3 degrees.
أشرف هذه المراتب هي هذه المرتبة المذكورة.
He said the most honorable is what we just mentioned.
أسوأ هذه المراتب هو ما كان عكسها.
He said and the worst of which is what is opposite to that, what opposes this.
أهل الفناء عن شهود عيوبهم وشهود فضائلهم، يشهدون الفضائل وينسون العيوب.
He says they're the ones who only witness their own virtues and their own merits, and they do not see their faults and flaws.
ويطالبون الناس بأداء حقوقهم ويقصرون في أداء حقوق الآخرين.
They seek their rights, all their rights from other people, but they do not fulfill their responsibilities towards them.
أوسطهم من شهد هذا وشهد هذا.
He said, and the middle path in this, and the middle rank are those who witness this and they witness that.
أي يشاهد عيوب الناس ويشاهد عيوبه.
He sees the faults and flaws of people and he sees his own faults and flaws.
ويؤدي حقوق الناس ويطالب بحقوقه.
He says he fulfills his responsibilities to people and also seeks his rights from others.
والكمال في ذلك.
And perfection in this.
يرى أصلا أن لا حق له.
Is that he witnesses he has no rights.
بل الحق لله جل وعلا.
All rights belong to Allah.
والحق لخلق الله من أجل الله.
And the rights for the responsibilities towards creation for the sake of the
فلا
Creator.
يتعامل معهم بشهود استقلالي.
He says, he does not deal with them as independently of witnessing Allah. And His
بل إذا
rights.
تعامل مع أحد من الخلق نسبه إلى الله هذا عبد من عباد الله فأنا أتعامل معه لأجل هذا الوصف أنه عبد.
So whenever he deals with any of the creation of Allah, he witnesses and recognizes that this individual is from the creation of Allah and is a servant of Allah, and he attributes him to the Creator.
ثم الناس في الفتوة على 3 درجات.
He says, and the people within Futuwa are of 3 levels and degrees.
الناس لا يستوون.
People are not all the same.
لا في علمهم ولا في جهلهم.
Not in their knowledge nor in their ignorance.
ولا في قوتهم ولا في ضعفهم.
Not in their strength or in their weakness.
يختلفون تماما.
He says they are very distinct and different.
لكن القوي أحب إلى الله تعالى.
The stronger one is the one that is more beloved to Allah.
القوي في الصفات.
The one who has strong attributes.
فالدرجة الأولى هي درجة ترك الخصومة.
The highest level is that a person leaves disputation and argumentation and fighting.
أن لا يخاصم أحدا أصلا.
He does not fight or have any disputes with anyone.
وهي قاعدة وضعها الإمام مالك رحمه الله تعالى.
And this is a principle that has been laid down by Imam Malik.
فقال لا تجادل بالسنة.
Do not argue with the Sunnah.
حتى العلم والسنة التي تكتسبها لا تجادل بها، لا تجعلها وسيلة للتنافر.
He said even the knowledge and the Sunnah that you attain, that you do not argue with it and buy it so that you cause people to flee.
أحكي هذه السنة فإن قبل منك وإلا فأمسك.
Speak of this Sunnah. If it is accepted, then be it. But if it is not accepted, then leave it.
فدرجة ترك الخصومة والتغافل عن الزلة ونسيان الأذية، هذه الدرجة الأولى.
He says, so you leave argumentation and disputation, and that you also leave
ترك الخصومة والتغافل عن الزلة.
And that you also do not see people's faults and flaws.
ونسيان الأذية أن فلان هذا قد آذاك.
And that you forget that this person harmed you. You try to forget what this person has done to you.
والنفس هذه إذا لم تتهذب لا ينسى الإنسان من آذاه ولكن ينسى من أعطاه.
And this soul, when it is not refined and trained properly, it never forgets the one who has harmed it and faulted, and it forgets the one who has done good towards it.
وهذا تماما عكس أوصاف النبوة.
And this is completely opposite to the attributes of the prophetic attributes.
كم من الناس آذى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم.
How many people harmed the messenger, peace be upon him?
عفى عنهم ولم يذكرهم بهذه الأذية بل قد نسيها صلى الله عليه وسلم.
He said how many harmed him and he pardoned them and he never mentioned it and he forgot about it.
فنعلم في توصيف الخلق أنه لا عدو لنا إلا 4.
He says, and we should know with regards to creation, we have no enemies except 4.
وهم ما جاء التنصيص فيهم.
And they are the ones who have been mentioned in Revelation.
أولها الشيطان إن الشيطان لكم عدو فاتخذوه عدوا.
He said the first of which is the devil, Satan. Allah mentions he is your enemy, so take him as a clear enemy.
ثم النفس لأنها تكب صاحبها في الشهوات.
And the ego, because it causes one to follow their desires.
ثم الهوى لأنه يدعوه إلى الانحراف.
Then impulses, these desirous impulses and inclinations also, because they call you towards waywardness.
ثم الكافر إذا أوغل في الحرب فهذا كافر حربي هذا عدو أما إذا لم يكن حربي فليس بعدو.
He said a disbeliever that has taken up arms against you and has fought against you, so long as they have done that, then they are an enemy. But if they do not pick up arms against you and fight against you, then they are not of those enemies.
غير هؤلاء لا ينبغي أن نتعامل معهم بعداوة بل نتعامل معهم بسخاوة.
He says anyone else other than these 4 categories, we do not treat them as an enemy, but rather we treat them with generosity.
هذه الدرجة الأولى من باب التخلي.
He says this is the first degree with regards to what we should empty ourselves of.
أي التارك للخصومات.
And that we should leave argumentation and
فلا
fighting.
يخاصم أحدا أصلا.
He does not fight anybody at all.
لكن بعض الناس في هذه الدنيا كل شيء يخاصم.
He said, but there are people in this world that have an issue with everything. They fight with everyone and everything.
لا يسلم أحد من الخلق من خصوماته.
Nobody is saved from their problems, from them arguing or fighting or disputation.
فربما إذا لم يجد من يخاصم يتخاصم مع سيارته أو مع ثوبه.
He says, so he doesn't find anyone to argue with or to have a problem with, and he might even have an issue and a problem with his own car, his
هذا
vehicle.
حال بعض الناس للأسف.
He said, this is the state of some people.
فلا ينصب صاحب هذه المرتبة خصما لنفسه بل النفس هي الخصم.
So he does not put up any other enemies to himself except his own ego.
هذه المنزلة كذلك هي 3 درجات. هذه المنزلة بنفسها وهي منزلة ترك الخصومة 3 مراتب.
And so this degree in and of itself, within it, there are 3 levels.
الأولى أن لا يخاصم بلسانه.
That he does not fight with anyone with his tongue.
الثانية أن لا ينوي المخاصمة بقلبه.
And that he also does not hold anything in his heart towards anyone.
ولا يخطر على باله هذا في حق نفسه.
And this does not even come to his mind, and these thoughts do not even approach him.
هذه الدرجة الأولى، درجة أن لا يخاصم بلسانه ولا ينوي الخصومة بقلبه ولا يخطرها على باله.
He says, so it's not on his tongue, it's not in his heart, and it also does not even come to his mind. It's not even in his thoughts.
أما في حق ربه سبحانه وتعالى، هذا الكلام على حق النفس. أما في حق ربه سبحانه وتعالى.
So this is with regard to the ego. Now when we speak about Allah,
أن يخاصم بالله وفي الله، أي من أجل الله لا من أجل حظ نفسه.
So if he takes so if he is going to stand against anyone, then he does it for the sake of Allah.
ويرد الأمر إلى الحكم العدل جل وعلا.
And that he refers this to the most just.
كان من أدعية الاستفتاح المنقولة عنه صلى الله عليه وسلم، وهي بعدد من الروايات كما ذكرها الإمام النووي في كتاب الأذكار.
So from the opening supplications of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and Imam Nawawi mentions this in his book Al-Adhkar.
قول النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وبك خاصمت وإليك حاكمت.
He says, and it is through you that I put all my disputes, and it is to you that I return.
هذه هي درجة الفتوة من العلماء والدعاة إلى الله.
So this is the level of futuwa of the scholars and those who are callers and invitees to Allah.
أما التغافل عن الزلة وهو أن لا ينظر أصلا إلى زلات الناس إلا من حيث التقويم فقط.
And with regards to not seeing people's faults and pardoning those faults, except mentioning them if there is a purpose and a reason for it.
ومهما تغافل عن هذه الزلات حتى يقوم غيره بحلها حتى لا تقع بينه وبين الناس وحشة دفع غيره ليحل هذه الزلات.
He says, so even if he sees a fault and he doesn't want to enter into it because it might cause a greater problem, he seeks out those who can reconcile these.
أما فتوة التغافل.
He says the futuwa of looking away from people's faults.
والتغافل هذا خلق عظيم.
He said this is a great attribute.
قال عنه الإمام أحمد بن حنبل رحمه الله تعالى.
Imam Ahmad has said about this.
9 أعشار الصفاء في التغافل عن الناس.
He says 9/10 of purity is by being heedless of people's faults.
فالتغافل أرفع من درجة الكتمان.
He says not seeing people's faults is higher than the level of containing and keeping it within yourself and not speaking of it.
قال أبو علي الدقاق.
Abu Ali al-Daqqaq has said,
جاءت امرأة إلى حاتم فسألته.
A woman came to Hatim and she asked him.
فاتفق أنه خرج منها في تلك الساعة صوت.
And so at that moment a sound came out from her.
فخجلت هذه المرأة من خروج الصوت.
So she became very shy and embarrassed because of this sound.
فقال لها حاتم ارفعي صوتك ماذا تقولين كأنه لم يسمع.
So Hatim said to her, I can't hear you, raise your voice, I can't hear what you're saying.
فأوهمها أنه أصم. مرة أخرى رفعت صوتها قال زيدي ماذا تقولين.
So he made it seem to her that he could not hear very well. So he said, when she raised her voice, he said, raise it further, I can't hear you.
سرت المرأة بذلك أن حاتم لم يسمع خروج الصوت منها.
She was so elated by this that Hatim had not heard this sound come from her.
فلقب بعد ذلك بحاتم الأصم.
So he was given the epithet of Hatim, who does not hear, the deaf.
هذا التغافل هو نصف الفتوة.
He said half of futuwa is looking away from people's flaws and faults.
وأما نسيان الأذية.
He said with regards to forgetting the harm that was perpetrated.
بأن تنسى أذية من آذاك حتى يصفو لك أو يصفو له قلبك.
He says, and that you completely display this attribute of forgetting a person's wrong that they have done to you until there is complete and utter purity in your relationship.
ولا تستوحش منه عند الملاقاة.
And that when you meet him, you are not repelled.
هناك نسيان آخر.
There is another type of forgetfulness.
وهو أدق من هذا النسيان.
And it is even more precise than this type of forgetfulness.
أن تنسى أنك أحسنت لفلان.
To forget that you even showed any generosity towards anyone.
كما تنسى أن فلان أساء إليك تنسى أنك أحسنت لفلان.
Just as you forget that individual wronged you, you should also forget that you showed any kindness or generosity towards that person.
وهذا النسيان أكمل من الأول.
He says, and this type of forgetfulness is more complete than the first.
قال القائل ينسى صنائعه والله يظهرها.
The saying has been said that he forgets the good deeds that he does and Allah makes it apparent.
إن الجميل إذا أخفيته ظهر.
And what is beautiful, when you conceal it, it becomes apparent itself.
الدرجة الثانية هي أن تقرب من يقصيك.
And the second level is that you bring near to you the one who tries to move away from you and doesn't want to have anything to do with you.
أي من يبعدك ويجافيك أنت تحاول أن تقربه. لا فقط تعرف تتركه بل أنت تحاول أن تقربه.
So one who pushes you away, you seek that person out and make an effort to bring that person nearer and closer to you.
وتكرم من يؤذيك.
And that you show generosity to the one that harms you.
وتعتذر إلى من يجني عليك.
And you seek forgiveness from the one who has transgressed your rights.
سماحة لا كظما.
That you do it in a pardoning, forgiving way, not in a way of suppressing your anger.
فرق بين السماحة والكظم. الكظم هو أن يمسك نفسه عن الانتقام. أما السماحة أعلى من ذلك.
He says that you do not restrain yourself such that you don't seek retribution or revenge, but rather you reach to a level of complete forgiveness.
كما قال سبحانه وتعالى والكاظمين الغيظ هذه درجة أولى والعافين عن الناس درجة ثانية والمحسن والكاظمين الغيظ والعافين عن الناس والله يحب المحسنين هذه درجة ثالثة هذه أعلى الدرجات إحسان.
So as is mentioned in the noble verse, that there are degrees. When a person is wrong, those who restrain and refrain and internalize that, and then there are those who are forgiving. And then the third degree is those who then, after all this, show kindness and generosity and do good to others.
يذكر أن بعض العبيد الذي كان يملكهم الإمام علي زين العابدين وقيل أنه جعفر الصادق دخل بسفود يعني إناء فيه نار فوقع من يده على بعض صبيان هذا الإمام فمات ابنه في الحال أمام عينيه.
It is said that it is Imam Ali Zain al-Abidin, in some narrations, in the Ja'far al-Sadiq, that he had within his home slaves that would be in the house, and one of them came and entered into his presence, and he had with him a bowl that was filled with hot boiling water, and the Imam had his son there before him, and as he walked in, it fell from his hand, and it poured over the child and killed the child before his own eyes.
فخاف الخادم من هذه الواقعة لكن يعلم أن هذا الرجل وقاف عند كتاب الله قال والكاظمين الغيظ.
So he was afraid and petrified, the one who was serving. But he knew that this Imam was one who stood fast before the book of Allah, restrained by the book of Allah. So then he recited this verse to him.
قال كظمنا غيظنا.
He says, restrain your anger through the verse. كاظمين الغيظ. So he said, we have restrained our anger.
قال والعافين عن الناس.
He says, and those that forgive others. He said, we have.
قال عفونا عنك.
He says, we have forgiven you.
قال والله يحب المحسنين.
And Allah loves those who show excellence in their dealings.
قال اذهب أنت حر لوجه الله.
He says, leave, you are free to go for the sake of Allah.
هكذا عمل القرآن في القلوب.
He says, this is what the Quran does to the hearts.
هذه الدرجة الثانية هي درجة أعلى من الأولى.
He says, this second level is higher than the first.
وأصعب.
And is more difficult.
لأنها ثقيلة على النفس.
Because it is heavy upon oneself.
أن تقبل من لطمك هذه ثقيلة على النفس.
He says to embrace one who has slapped you, that's very heavy on you.
الأولى تتضمن ترك المقابلة والتغافل، أما الثانية تتضمن الإحسان بعد الإساءة.
He says the first is that you're leaving something, you're refraining from rights and so on and so forth. He said, but the second one is you actively pursuing goodness towards those who have done harm to you.
حتى قال القائل إذا مرضنا أتيناكم نعودكم.
He says, if one of the saying said, if we become sick, we are the ones who come and visit you.
من الذي يستحق العيادة؟ المريض ولا؟ قال لا، أنتم إذا مرضنا أتيناكم نعودكم.
He says, who is more deserving, the one who is sick to be visited or the other person? He said, but no, in this state he's saying, when I become afflicted and I'm ill, I will come and seek you out and visit you.
وتذنبون فنأتيكم ونعتذر.
He says, and you sin and you have faults and flaws and you do wrong, and we come to you and we seek forgiveness from you.
أنت تذنب لكن أنا آتي وأعتذر. أنت تذنب في حقي، المفترض أنت تأتي وتعتذر لي. قال لا، أنا آتيك وأعتذر إليك.
He says, you have wronged me and done something to me, to harm me, yet it's supposed to be that you come and you seek forgiveness from me. He says, but no, I will come to you and seek your pardon.
هذا قانون لن يفهمه كثير من أهل الأرض، ولكن من درس سيرة النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم سيعرف كيف تطبق هذه القواعد.
He says these are principles that most people do not know how to implement and do not understand, yet the one who understands the biography and the life of the Prophet ﷺ knows how to utilize these attributes and qualities.
وهذا من التصوير القرآني الدقيق.
He says, and this is very deep in the understanding of the Quran.
أن الله لا يسلط عليك أحدا إلا بذنب وقع منك أنت.
Allah. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not send anyone to wrong you except because of a sin that you have committed.
حيث يقول سبحانه وتعالى وما أصابكم من مصيبة فبما كسبت أيديكم ويعفو عن كثير. يعني لو أخذك الله بجميع الذنوب التي تفعلها كانت الإساءات من الخالق كثيرة ولكن يعفو عن كثير.
He says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says there is not a tribulation and a calamity that befalls you except it's by what your own hands have earned, and Allah forgives many things. Meaning, if Allah was to take us to account for every wrong that we have done and committed, He said, how would we be able to withstand this? What happens to us is only a little, and Allah has forgiven most of it.
فتعلم بذلك أنك إذا بدأت بالجناية انتقم الله منك على يد فلان.
He says that if you are the one who begins to commit a wrong against somebody else, then know that Allah is the one that will send one to that any wrong that happened to you has been sent to you by Allah.
فالجدير بالاعتذار إذا من أنت لأنك أذنبت فهذه الجناية التي وقعت عليك بسببك.
He says, so now in this case, who is the one that is more deserving of seeking forgiveness? You are, because what happened to you was because of you.
هذه الدرجة الثانية.
He says this is the second level.
الدرجة الثالثة.
The third level.
وهي من أنوار الحقيقة.
He says these are from the radiant lights of true realities.
وهو أن لا يتعلق في سيره بدليل.
He says that he does not attach himself in his wayfaring to any particular guide.
ولا يقابل الأشياء بطلب عوض.
He says, and he does not face things by seeking a compensation for them.
بل أن يرى أن ما حصل من أحد من الخلق إنما هو تدبير إلهي فيرد الأمر إلى الله.
So whatever happens to him, he knows this is already predestined and this is by the will of Allah. So he immediately attributes it to Allah.
فيرى على الحقيقة أن المعطي الله.
So he sees in reality that the one who gives is Allah.
وأن المبتلي الله.
And the one who has caused this tribulation is Allah.
وأن الخلق آلة في يد الجلال.
And that the creation are all instruments in the hand of the most majestic.
فيستوي عنده حينئذ.
So it becomes to him, before him, all things.
السراء والضراء.
The joy, the difficulty, hardship, and the joy become equal to him, before him.
وهذه دقيقة من الدقائق نسأل الله تعالى أن يكشف لنا أسرارها في عافية.
So this is a very fine affair. We ask Allah that He reveal its reality to us in goodness and well-being.
نسأل الله أن يفتح لنا ولكم أبواب الخير كلها.
We ask that Allah opens up all the doors of goodness.
ويغلق عنا وعنكم أبواب السوء والشر كلها.
And He closes all doors of evil to us.
وأن يبارك في هذه المجالس.
And then He bless these gatherings.
ويجعل لنا ولكم فيها عظيم الأثر.
And that He gives this gathering a great effect upon us and our lives.
يظهر فينا وفيكم أنوار الفتوة والنبوة.
And He makes manifest within us the lights of prophethood and futuwah.
والمحبة في الله والأخوة.
And brotherhood and love for the sake of Allah.
والقيام بخدمة هذه الملة على أحسن الأحوال وأكملها.
And that to serve this great nation of the Prophet in the most complete and perfect manner.
صلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم. الحمد لله رب العالمين.